Well, we'll kick right off in today's session. My name is Darshini Shah, and I'm the product manager here with K3. And today I am joined by Nick Trevor, the product development manager.
Hello, everyone.
As you can see us here and you can see our screens, let's focus really on the content for today's screen. So I'm going to stop sharing my webcam so you can focus very much on the content. What's today all about? Well, let's take a look and see what the agenda is, what we're going to be covering today. We're going to set the scene of what we're going to talk about in terms of the actual idea behind document printing and reporting. We're going to talk about some of the tools that we have in our toolkit. We're going to start seeing some of these tools in action. And really, the focus is going to be on the bulk of what do you actually want to use at what point in time. So, without further ado, we all live in the world that has something related to this. We might have a factory, we might have distribution, engineering drawings, some repair jobs that might be coming in. We've got lots and lots of dispatch going on, and we've got reporting board packs. So all of that's happening in our businesses on a day in and day out basis. And we've got various users that are wanting different elements that they want to consume based on what they want. And as much as I'd like to be green, we know that paper is going to flow throughout that organization. There may be some elements that have been transformed into products such as Translution or mobile devices or even SYSPRO that you see scattered throughout the organization. However, there is that piece of paper that's still going to say to someone what they need to do at what point in time. We're going to have some reports, some trend analysis that might be coming through. We may have alerts or announcements that come through as part of what's happening in the business, and that ERP information needs to get bubbled up. And that's where we need to now go ahead and trigger for someone to do something with it. So documents, reports, fundamentally, the end goal is really telling someone what it is that they need to do, where they need to do it, what do they need to do next potentially, what's actually happening today, where am I at with it, and maybe signal and do a little bit of crystal ball gazing for the future, and maybe even just a bit of a state of the nation. So with that in mind, what are some of the things that we have available in that toolkit? Well, for those of you that have been with SYSPRO quite a long time now, we've had quite a few tools available within SYSPRO itself for a while. There is a traditional report writer that was available for a very long time. If you were within the space of finance, you had the financial report writer. And if you're really old school, you might have even used ODBC to extract some of that data out and do some external reporting. Then came SYSPRO 6.1, and SYSPRO expanded out and really enriched the reporting space with the introduction of SYSPRO reporting services. With SYSPRO 7 and 8, we have the introduction of business insights that now start driving user behavior right within the product itself. And you've got OData, which is the newest release available in SYSPRO 8. And that's now not necessarily a reporting tool, but a great way to be able to extract some data out. With all of that going on, we've always had some additional tools in our toolkit. We've had K3 reports, AutoMail, the ability to do document distribution, Bartender for any sort of label printing, and external tools that still tap into that rich ERP data. SQL Server reporting services, Excel. As much as we'd like to say that no one uses data outside of SYSPRO, Excel still is probably used predominantly in a lot of areas within the business. You may have had some additional analytics, Power BI, Click, Profix for some budgeting, financing. There may be additional tools as well. So there's a lot that's available in the toolkit. Today, Nick and I are going to focus on 3 specific areas. We want to talk a little bit more about SYSPRO reporting services, K3 reports, AutoMail, and Bartender. Really just going to focus in and hone in on these 3 and talk about the compare and contrast. We have had sessions that have focused on a few of the other areas, including business insights and some of the reporting and analytics tools in other webinars. So we're not ignoring them. It's just not necessarily the focus for today. So when we talk about those 4 areas, what really I want to talk about is the fact that we've got 3 sets of tools that are available for us for document creation. We've got SYSPRO reporting services that allows us to create and consume and distribute documents and reports. We also have K-through reports that helps deliver some of that. Bartender also does the same thing. And then purely on the document distribution side, we've got AutoMail that focuses purely on document distribution, whereas with report SRS and K-through reports, you have the ability to do document distribution as well. Okay, so let's learn a little bit more about what of those 3 that are there. But before we do that, just want to get a sense of where you're currently at. So if I want to go ahead and have that poll kick off, which I see that Nick's kicked off for me, so that's great. Just want to get a sense from on screen, what is it that you currently have? And choose all of those that apply for me, if you don't mind. We'll leave that poll open for a few minutes. Unsurprisingly, it looks like absolutely everyone on this call is using reporting services, SYSPRO reporting services. Got about 84 that have voted, just another couple seconds and see if we get a few more votes in. All right, excellent. Great. So that particular poll, we've got 94% that are using SYSPRO reporting services already. So for the other 6%, we'll go and talk a little bit about what SRS is all about. We've got just over half of you using K-through reports, as well as AutoMail, about 20% using Bartender, and then SSRS is also in use. Great to know. That's an in-house skill set that you've got. Fantastic. Okay, so let's start out. I said I'd tell you a little bit about SYSPRO reporting services. SYSPRO reporting services was introduced by SYSPRO, as I say, with SYSPRO 6.1 or so going forward, and it's been improved over the years. It's predominantly used to design professional document and reports using Crystal. And fundamentally, it's a Crystal engine that's backing SYSPRO reporting services. Now, with SRS, you've got standard templates, and it's not just about having those documents that are created, but it's also about what you do in terms of distribution. You can print them, you can email them, you can save them away for you to use in the future, including the archiving functionality. So without getting into too much detail, what I do want to do is show you the fact that with SRS, there are 2 areas that we have. We've got documents that are separated out from reports. What do I mean by that? If I go into the reporting service itself, what you'll notice is all of the modules that we have within SYSPRO. And as I drill into them, we've got our journal reports, our tax reports that are available. If I go into my general ledger, start to extend out into my trial balances. If I'm talking about my jobs, I may have my tracking, production. That's fundamentally what we're talking about in terms of report. I'm trying to report on something, I'm consuming something that's happened. Whereas with documents, we have the ability to have transactional level information that's getting surfaced up. And again, broken down based on modules, but we've now got information that's relevant for various areas of the business. So if I've got supplier invoices that are coming in, I may have purchase orders that I'm issuing. I need to now engage with someone outside of my organization potentially. So I need to have something that looks a little bit more professional. And within both documents and reports, I have the ability to tailor existing formats or create my own. And this is now putting my stamp on what it is. So within the tools we have available, for example, if I come into my sales area, what you'll notice is I've got the ability to go ahead. Oh, I don't want to be archiving. I've got the ability from sales to be able to design my invoices. That invoice is something that I can use to go ahead and print. I've got conditions that I can choose depending on which location I'm sending information from. Might want to use a different logo. Might want to have different terms and conditions embedded and stamped within that. Now, what you'll notice is from here, I've got a list of all of the options that I have. I can go in and design my templates, and I can choose which template I want to design. So if I take my lovely invoice, I can choose a particular format, and I can start designing it. Now, there are additional options that are available. I'm not going to get into all of them because by no means is this a training session, but what I want to drill into is the fact that this particular template is available to me in Crystal. So anyone that has Crystal skills, you are now able to go ahead and start tailoring this. I can choose to add in logos to make it a little bit more colorful for me. I can add in notes for terms and conditions. But what I think is important to point out is with SYSPRO and the partnership on SYSPRO reporting services, I don't have to go ahead and choose a specific set of data and go directly to SQL. SYSPRO has actually built programs that do a lot of the calculation for us. So what you'll notice is in the invoice, I've got various elements of that invoice. I might have details about my customer that's at a summary level. Then I've got details against the transaction levels itself. What are the items that I'm selling? Are there any freight items, any service charges that are tagged onto that? All of that data that you have against your sales orders that you're capturing that you need to perhaps confirm back to your customer based on what they've ordered from you is all available for you, easily pre-packaged into, so you don't have to build that all out. So it's done a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And that's fundamentally the benefit that we've got with SRS. So with SRS, we've got the combination of standard technology with Crystal, some really powerful business objects that are there. And then in addition to that, what you have is the ability for me to be able to invoke a program that calls on that format and batches or sends that individual document out for me as well. So that's the power of SYSPRO reporting services, is now we've got something that is customer ready, generates a document, and it doesn't have to be a physical print. It could be just a PDF that we send off to someone in an email. So now we're saving a little bit of paper and going away towards that sustainability goal. But it's all now tied in directly into the ERP data without me having to understand and drill into all of the lovely logic and built-in details. So it's not fully technical. It gives me the ability for someone like me with relatively low technical skills to be able to deliver that forward. So that in a high level nutshell is all about SRS. We've taken a little look at it. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Nick, who's going to talk about K3 reports.
Thank you, Darshni. So K3 reports is a different engine that we've built in-house to help harness some of the power of Crystal reports. So it's a server-side reporting engine. So all the logic and the generation of reports is done server-side, and that's not to be confused with SYSPRO server-side reporting. This is done slightly different using the runtime. It's all about printing documents or sending documents or just generally generating documents in different modes, whether that's single documents at a time or generating a whole batch of them. So typically we use this kind of product when the documentation requirements are surplus to what SYSPRO can give out the box. So when we've got things like commercial invoices been the most popular one lately, or packing lists or box manifests, anything additional to that, we kind of end up using K3 reports because it gives us the server-side technology to automate these print jobs, to preview them in a different way, and to kind of work with them outside of the SYSPRO ecosystem, but all at the same time staying completely within SYSPRO. So these can be designed. You can even design the reports using SYSPRO and then harness it through the K3 report runtime. There's a few little bit extra features on top of that. You've got a barcode API, so it can generate QR codes or code 1-to-8 barcode formats with relative ease, and you can view them and preview them in a web browser, which is really nice. So I'm going to go through a quick demo of what we've done. I got control there, Darshni, can you pass over? There we go. Okay. Don't know if I can. Thank you. Right, so what I've developed inside SYSPRO now is a commercial invoice. And now I've noticed a few names in this room already that might be familiar with this kind of process. So because we've delivered at a few sites, and obviously these requirements have come out since Brexit and leaving the EU, there's been more need to generate documents. The commercial invoice has been the most prevalent one. So what I have built inside SYSPRO is just a simple print that calls into the K3 Reports API to generate a document. So if I go to my sales orders and dispatch note query module, I will be able to run my little preview. So this is a non-standard button that I've added in that uses a VB script to call K3 Reports. So one of the technical or kind of requirements with K3 Reports is it is a more technical product. So we will quite typically design these for you guys unless you've got the technical skills in-house to do it. So while SYSPRO Reporting Services got more of a GUI and that kind of on top of it to kind of make it a bit easier to manage yourselves, this is quite technical in what's required. So like I say, this is a non-standard button I've built in. So I'm going to just navigate to any old dispatch note. And the idea is that I can simply just click that print commercial invoice button and it should basically generate myself in the web browser a very basic report. And then from there, I can go on, I can print it, I can save it down, or I can even email it from within the K3 Reports utility. So you can see there, that's open it in my browser of choice. We're outside of SYSPRO, but rendering on top of the SYSPRO data step. And the other technical aspect of this, the data is coming direct from SQL. So it's not using the business object layer to render the data. So there is more of a technical skill to get the data correct and validated against the business objects. So we try not to use K3 Reports for super complex tax or VAT reporting scenarios when that is already baked into SYSPRO. We'll use this for those little documents on top that your business needs. You can see here I've got a QR code embedded in, which can be used across, and I can obviously include anything else I want to do in the same document. Aside from this, there's also active logs, so I can see when print jobs are going through my K3 Reports utility and what kind of prints they go into. Second to this, I've built a completely non-standard application using application builders, which lists all of my open dispatch notes, allows me to print my commercial invoice or preview it again. So I'm going to leave preview off in this case, and if I hit print, I should then see that will send off a task to K3 Reports, and that will say it's printed. And I've just got to accept to a PDF print, and you should see that it's now dropped into here, which is 248, and that's my same report automatically printed in the background. So again, the power of it is I can use this to report. I can print to any printer automatically, whether that's from SYSPRO itself or from Translution or Orchard or any other utility that we have. So that's kind of the power of K3 Reports in a nutshell. I'm going to go back to the presentation. And so the next thing I want to talk about is Bartender. So Bartender is heavily used within a lot of our customer businesses, all around label printing. So while K3 Reports and SRS are good at kind of the documents, the A4 printouts, what we struggle with in those tools are the smaller labels that come on your Zebra printers with different smaller stock, and this is where Bartender really shines. It has support for a huge amount of printer manufacturers, Zebra being the most popular one that we see out there, and all the different ranges of label sizes and stock that you'd get in, whether it's thermal printing or whatnot. So again, this is about automation of creation of labels and barcodes, integrates to multiple business systems with relative ease. You can either go straight to SQL to create triggers, or you can use webhooks. Anything that your kind of application support Bartender will have a way to trigger out based off. It allows monitoring of printing, so I can constantly see how many integrations are performing, how many labels are being printed, where they're being printed to. And it comes with its inbuilt label designer. So this is outside of the Crystal designer. It has its own designer, which I'll show you in a moment, where you can add on barcodes, you can add on all the additional text, and you can make it obviously compliant to any rules that govern your business model. You can add in RFID tags and everything. So like I say, it supports multiple label formats. So when you're designing them, you will select your label sizes and design it based on the label size, and it all supports the common label printer brands. Finally, there's a web tool for printing manually printed labels, which allows you to go to a web browser and type in a bit of information to generate a simple label to the printer. So I'm going to go to that now. Yeah, thank you. I can't do my Control Alt Shift. Okay, so I'm going to start quickly in the designer. So do I have that open? I've got library open. So this is my library of labels. So I've got a sample stock label that I've added into it. And if I just quickly open that up, I'll see this is my template that I've designed. Really, really bog standard. I've literally put the stock code as a barcode on here and the job number. That is linked to my embedded data sources. If I look here, I've got a form and it allows me to enter particular information in the job and the stock code to generate it. Now, I've done a really, really basic form. Within these forms, you can do lookups, you can do validations, you can make it entirely more complex than what you're seeing here now. For simplicity, I've just left it as free format entry, so I can put whatever I want in there and print what I need. So that's my designer. You can see I've got various, I might check this out. I've got various barcode formats from QR to 128. I can add images, and you can see here I've configured it for my Zebra ZT610 printer here, and that has a various item width and height associated with it. So once I've designed my label, I can trigger that. So I can either do that again as a automated task, a trigger event from SYSPRO, which I'll show you in a moment, or it might just be a really simple manual print. So if I go to my Bartender print portal, which is accessible from Chrome, I can go into Librarian and I can see my stock label here. So I can simply click that. I can have a list of stock labels categorized differently, and I can select my printer, the copies, and I can add a preview print. I'm going to preview in this instance. And here's the data entry form that I showed you before. So like I say, at the minute, I've just got free format, but you can put validations and different controls to make this form entirely more complex than what you've seen here now. And I can hit preview, and then it'll generate me a barcode, which I can then print to my printer. Okay, so what now if I want to trigger this stock label each time I receive a job in SYSPRO, because that would be a valid point where I might need a label for each product that comes out. So I want to print it, and I want to base it on the number of copies to print how many labels, so I can stick it on the side of each product. So what we have there is we have a tool called the Integration Builder in Bartender. I'll show you briefly what that looks like without going into it too complex. So we set up an integration file, which basically this particular one is triggered from SQL. So it's looking for a new record that gets entered into a particular table. And what it's doing then is for each data in there, it's going to print a document. In this case, it's printing my sample stock label. If I look at some of the other information, at the minute I've hard coded it to a printer. You can see here the copies here is actually a variable. This is pulling it from the data set. So based on the number of items I book in, that's how many copies of the label I'll get. I could have done the same with the printer. I could have based it on a variable. For now, I'm going to just hard code it in, and I can actually put then advanced printer options for failovers. So if the printer is offline, it can fail over and print to a secondary printer on the shop floor. I've got some linking from my queries to the label information, and ultimately that is all I kind of need. Once I'm happy with that, I deploy it, and then it'll start triggering as I go in. So let's see if I can demonstrate that. So for now, I've got this little tool here, which is emulating the print job as it comes in. So if I go into SYSPRO now, and if I print a job receipt, I should see, or hopefully see, a label come through on my little emulator. So if I go to work in progress, job postings, and then go into job receipts. I'm going to click on a job from before. I'm just going to put 2 in and hit post. So hopefully you can see here now, receive my label, and it's coming. So that's emulating how quick it is from posting a label to what it would like appear on the shop floor. So really, really powerful tool. It is production ready. It's made for a high velocity of labels, and it really shines on the shop floor in the manufacturing industries, especially around compliance and governance. Okay, so I'm just going to post that out. I think that will do it for bartender. Okay, back to you, Ashley.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Nick. It gives us a really great overview of both K3 reports and bartender and kind of where they sit and fit. When I talk about the document distribution side of things, which is AutoMail. So AutoMail is basically something that will take a PDF document, emails coming in with PDFs, and the idea behind it is to create emails with content pages attached, and it does the batch emailing out. Fundamentally, if you've got Crystal Reports or SYSPRO reporting services that's generating that PDF for you, it will go ahead and take that and help and take care of that distribution. Takes script files as well with templates to create your professional stationery. So if you have a very basic format that you've created in SRS and you want to maybe have conditional logos that print, you don't want to take care of that in SRS, AutoMail can take care of that for you. The nice benefit of AutoMail itself and the reason why it continues to live in the SYSPRO ecosystem is the fact that it can parse out that particular file that gets generated to see who and where it needs to go. It can be emailed and printed, what the contents are, maybe additional attachments that we want to go ahead and send through. And you don't have to now start building out really complicated Crystal formulas to be able to do that. With SYSPRO itself, we know that there's a bit of a limitation in terms of the number of contacts and the email addresses that you might be able to store. When you're engaging with your customers, you don't always have just one email address against that particular customer that you want to send your invoices, your delivery notes all through to. And with AutoMail, you now have a robust engine to be able to distribute that out. Now, we talked about the fact that it's PDF documents. It doesn't really matter where that PDF document's getting generated. And that's really the power of it, because you can start with SYSPRO. You can even take a K3 report because that's going to generate a PDF for you, as Nick just showed. You may have additional programs within your ecosystem that may still also need to get distributed out. You may have a CRM system. You may have a CAD system that's generating engineering drawings. You want to send that out. As long as it's generating that PDF, you can then go ahead and have some logic built into it that AutoMail will take care of and distribute for you. So that fundamentally is the power of AutoMail. So let's take a look at AutoMail. I'm going to start in SYSPRO itself. And within SYSPRO, if I take a look at my document, I have an invoice. I've defined, as we looked at earlier, some header information within this particular document. And that's where the power of AutoMail's logic comes in, is the ability for me to extend that out. I've got syntax here that I can add in as a non-developer to say, I want this to go to a particular email address against the customer, and I've got a formula in here to say, pick it up maybe against a custom form field. Or if there's no email address for that customer, because we haven't managed to capture that yet, send it to an internal person who's going to then go ahead and print it off and mail it if we're still having to do that. Gives you some subject details. You now have control over what subject goes out rather than having a generic message. And then within that, you can have a little bit of body that goes through in the email. You can change that messaging as you go along. And you can start adding in additional documents. My terms and conditions, I want to make sure that that gets sent out with every single invoice, because that's really important. That's not something that I want to have to manually attach. And I'll be honest, I'm too lazy to design an SRS report that creates a sub-report with all of those terms as they change. I just want to have an updated PDF that will get sent out every time. I might even have some additional notification that I want to send out. It will take care of that. And then finally, the last piece that I want to talk about is the fact that I may want to save these documents that are getting sent away in a particular folder. And that, for me, is building up a really nice, quick archiving tool that I have available for others within the business to be able to access as well. Everything else still remains the same as I would have for any other invoice. I'm still leveraging the power of SRS with the logic built in from a business object standpoint. So all of the heavy calculations are taken care of by SYSPRO. Now, I've got my template all set up. It's got all of the lovely tags that Automail will know and understand. So if I go ahead and choose to reprint a particular invoice that I created earlier today, if I send that off, what's going to happen is it's picking it up from the Automail perspective. Anyone that uses Automail, we've got a lovely little monitoring tool that when I refresh, we'll see an increase in the number of batches. And if I've done this wrong, which it looks like I have, it will tell me whether that email gets sent or not. And in this case, what I want to do is when I log on, I actually may have an earlier email that I sent through. Now, this is for a particular PO that came in, PO September 2022 from this particular customer. There's my invoice, and it doesn't have the header details. It stripped those off. It's not sending all of that. It's simply using that for logic. I've got a trial license, so that's why it's giving me a trial. It's also included my terms and conditions. So everything to do with this particular order, any T's and C's. And I've got a bit of a newsletter that I want to share with the individuals that I do business with. We've got a conference coming up, want to tell them about it. We've got some training that's available as well that they can sign up for. And that's all getting sent out without someone remembering to attach that to the invoices that are going out. Now, as I send that out and I print that off, it's also told me that I want to save that particular invoice away. And that saved it away into a nice, neat folder for me, which I then can go ahead and pull up and show anywhere within SYSPRO itself when I have it associated with that customer. So against that customer, I've got that exact same invoice that I can open up that's been distributed. So really quickly now I have the ability to have my collections team, my telesales team, go ahead and keep track of all of the customer specific documents. It's not doing anything fancy. It's simply gone ahead and saved that file into a particular folder. So we've got a nice quick archiving and document retrieval tool, very light document management system that I've built in simply with Automail and then document distribution. Now we talked about the fact that that particular item didn't go through. I might have had a mistake in my email address. I might not have pulled it through. This is available for me on the server, but not every individual that works in document distribution, sending out invoices is going to go ahead and have access to the server. So the nice thing about Automail is there is also a web monitoring tool that's available. That at a glance gives you a great dashboard of everything that we've sent out so far, and you can choose when to clear it and so on, how long you want to keep that history for. It shows you also in here the body of the email that was sent out and all of the attachments that Automail sent out. So we looked at those in the email from a customer as well as the invoice details. And if I've got any retries, what happened to any failed items when it comes to the email, as well as all the jobs. Now in this case, I've got a failed batch. It will show me the details of what's happening with that failed batch as well. So the nice part about the Automail is it not only takes care of the document distribution, also helps me with some of my very light document management, visibility, and archiving functionality, but it also has a fantastic monitoring tool that's available. Now, what you'll notice is because I'm in the web browser, I also have this available from anywhere, technically, if I want, in order to be able to access and see what's going on. And that, I think, is a really nice addition to AutoMail that we've got in there as well. So high level, we showed a little bit of what AutoMail can do there. We've looked at SRS, we've looked at K3 reports, Bartender. So which one? Which one do you use when? Want to have a little bit of a conversation around this, because some of the things to think about based on what is involved include technical skills, performance, accessibility, and where and when you're using this from. So, Nick, one of the things that we talked about was the fact that you've got SRS and K3 reports. Now, K3 report seems quite technical to me as well. Am I designing all the reports from scratch? And Crystal, did I hear that correctly?
So typically you'd be designing them with a blank template, taking it from SQL. So it's not, you don't have those samples necessarily that you get out of the box with SRS. You will be building it based on your business requirement, which is why there's the technical skills involved to build them up, because we sometimes have to write quite complex queries that go beyond into other SYSPRO databases to pull information in to generate complex documents. So based on the requirements, we build it out from there.
Now, SYSPRO also has the programs to be able to invoke. So the thing that I like about K3 reports is if SYSPRO doesn't have a program for something that I want to generate a crystal or a PDF for, I can leverage K3 reports for something like that, because by default, I just need a way to trigger. And for me to get that information generated, I don't have to rely on something that exists in SYSPRO pre-built for me to be able to generate that document as well.
Yeah, correct. So the documents can be then triggered based on the API. And then, like I showed before, we can even occasionally, there is the requirement to build a program using SYSPRO's power tailoring to give a GUI towards that. But typically, you wouldn't necessarily need that GUI to generate a report at all, which is obviously some of the powerful stuff behind K3 reports.
Fantastic. Now we looked at Bartender a little bit as well. Now it's interesting because I've got the ability to add a barcode onto a Crystal report as SYSPRO reporting services. I can also add a barcode onto K3 reports. So why Bartender?
So Bartender is much more powerful when it comes to compatibility with different label sizes, formats, printers, and generally it is a lot more, it can handle high volumes of data, and also a lot larger wide array of barcode formats are available in Bartender. So like say, K3 reports really handles well with A4 sizes or A5, so your standard paper sizes from a printer. Bartender is perfect for volume-based printing of small labels to even larger labels if you need it.
Fantastic. And I think for me, every time I think of Bartender, I think of the go-to when it comes to production-ready labels, and especially when you've got a high volume, high pace, high speed production line, where I might have to generate multiple labels for exactly the same product because something is going on the product itself, to identify that with maybe serialization. And then I've got something that goes on the box of the product that it gets packaged into, and then perhaps even the pallet. So I now need that exact same label multiple times in potentially different sizes as well. And that for me is where Bartender really sings. I could do the same in SYSPRO, but it's quite fiddly, and I wouldn't have the ability to easily change different codes and formats and things like that as well.
Yeah, exactly that.
Perfect. And I think also when it comes to thermal printers, which is what you referred to earlier with Bartender, it's something that sits really nicely and natively. Bartenders really focus very much in and around making sure that label printing is what they do, that is very much their focus. Whereas when we're talking about SYSPRO reporting services or K3 reports, what we're talking about is focusing on trying to do documents and reports, really. It's not something that's focused purely on labels. So that's not the core functionality. If you're talking about documents, I wouldn't really look at Bartender.
Yes, exactly. And likewise. So we've also got the whole governance and compliance side of with Bartender. If you look at some of the templates they provide out the box, you'll see there's a whole raft of kind of GS1 style formatted barcodes and everything else that you can bake in there. So that's where it's really strong at as well.
Perfect. I've actually got a question that's come in, Nick, regarding the technical skills. Are you referring to the export documents?
Sorry.
And yeah, Mark, that's right. It is very much the export documents, because now you're starting to pull in additional information. You may have it within SYSPRO itself, but to try and put that together into SRS is a little bit more heavy lifting than K3 reports. So when you're talking about the technical skills needed to be able to pull that together, K3 reports really sits in really nicely with that, and you can trigger it off at the end of that dispatch process.
Yeah, exactly. And we always come across funny requirements with export based on obviously you kind of your duty rates or different things. If you're shipping to like a freight forward, or if you're going direct to the country and you've got your own business set up there and you're doing intercompany trading, we always find that there's always nuances between what we have to present on these documents that we find having just a standard dispatch query business object just doesn't give us the information, because in a way we're actually changing the information on the fly based on certain rules within the business. And that's what we find we have to build in using these technical skills into the SQL queries.
I think for me, it's also about the complexity of the requirements. When we're starting to get into slightly more complicated requirements that go beyond the standard of SYSPRO and traditionally what you would generate from a business out of an ERP system, that's where K3 reports really shines. It's that slightly more complicated level that really goes in. Hopefully that answers the question there, Mark. But if not, please use the Q&A and definitely have a little bit more of a conversation around that. And then the last thing we talked about really was automail. Now, from my perspective, SRS does a fantastic job of document distribution. So yeah, you can absolutely use SYSPRO reporting services to be able to send out all of your purchase orders or your batch invoices, or maybe distribute your jobs that you've got in through different elements of your warehouse or production floor. No issue there. Automail comes into its own when you're now starting to have to do additional logic again. You're adding that layer of complexity to where you're distributing your documents through to. And like Bartender, Automail's focus is very much just on document distribution. So they focus in and around making sure that that runs through seamlessly and being able to send it to multiple individuals, multiple email addresses, multiple locations. And it very much is in and around that. I love the fact that it gives you that additional layer of visibility in terms of actually identifying if something's not necessarily gone where it is. To be able to diagnose becomes a really powerful thing as well. And that to me gives me that second real benefit around document distribution. Is there anything else that I've missed around Automail that you wanted to add there, Nick?
Yeah, I was going to ask about how you would set up the different email addresses in SYSPRO. What would you, because obviously SYSPRO comes with a natively one email address, how would you add more into that to send documents to different people?
That's a great point. There's a couple of things. If you've got contact management, you've got multiple email addresses that you could natively store against that, but then you'd have to build which email address to use into your SRS report. But the other way to do it is against your customer master record itself, where someone may be sitting there and transacting every single day. Create a custom form field for each individual email address that you might want to distribute that document to. And you would choose which one, depending on the document formats. If I've got an order acknowledgement, I've got an order acknowledgement email address against that customer that I'm going to be using, as opposed to something that I'm going to send an invoice out to versus something that I might even send a PO to, because that customer might actually be a supplier of mine. So that's pretty good in that sense.
That's amazing. So is Automail purely about emailing, or is there anything else you can do? Can you print and letter it to someone?
You see, now you're just stacking the deck there. You're absolutely right. I focus so much in and around emailing because, look, I'm Canadian and I come from the West Coast, where I have to hug a tree every time I print a piece of paper. So I try not to physically talk about printing. But yes, of course, there are people that still need to produce paper. You don't have email addresses for everyone. You're still stuffing envelopes for that. Yes, 100%. And it's about that batch where I've got 600 invoices that might be going out, of which only 2 need to get physically printed and sent. And the 598 of the other ones will go ahead and get emailed out. So for those, it will take care of all of that automatic printing for you and all of that logic. You're not having to have someone say, right, everything that I want to mail, I'm going to have to print out separately. Everything that I want to go ahead and send off to a different email address, I'm going to have to send off separately as well. So it takes care of that for you in that batch without you having to think about which ones you're going to send where.
Amazing. And I thought Canadians were all about facts.
Well, we do fax every so often, but we've moved on since I left, so I should have left the country earlier. We've got a great comment here from Mark. Actually, it goes back to the conversation about bartending. You're right, we've not talked about this. Mark's actually linked scales to pass weights in bartender for that particular job. And so with SYSPRO, if you're having to integrate to scales, it's a lot more difficult. And actually, that's a really good point, Mark. Thanks for bringing that up. Bartender natively will allow you to integrate to weighing scales as well, and it lives in that environment so nicely. Nick, I'm not sure if you wanted to add to that as well.
No, that's perfect for me.
Excellent, good stuff. I see another note in here that I've missed. Hang on a second. I feel like I need hold music.
So I think it's gone.
Okay, there's a note here around client-side reporting or just server-side. It would be good if you can clarify that a little bit more for me in terms of what functionality, because I apologize, I didn't catch the question as it was coming up. And so if we can just get a little bit more clarity on that, that would be great. Now, that's a good point because we haven't talked a little bit about client-side and server-side reporting. That was something that was introduced with SYSPRO 7. And as we're moving more and more towards server-side reporting only as customers upgrade to 8, because there's newer technology that SYSPRO's introduced where you don't have the ability to go ahead and sit within a standard client. You may be sitting in a web browser, you may be sitting on a mobile device, and now all of a sudden we need that document generation to sit on the server and be able to take care of that for you. There are some implications with server-side, and actually that's a good point, because as we're moving more and more towards SYSPRO 8, we're finding more customers that need AutoMail in terms of that document distribution, because with moving to server-side, rather than sending an email locally from your computer and your own email address, you are sending that email just on the server. So you've got to have something called SMTP set up, and you're sending that email from one email address. So before, when Joe in accounts used to be able to send out all the invoices and Fred was sending the purchase orders, it's now all going to be either accounts or a generic @businessname.com email address. And with AutoMail, you can start distributing and shuffling that a little bit better as well. Now, there's some additional nuances in the way that behavior around client-side and server-side work. And it's about user behavior change in terms of where you go to preview. The nice part about moving to server-side is you do get a bit of performance improvement because all of the work, rather than it being done on your individual machine, is being done on a big, powerful server in the background. So hopefully that helps differentiate a little bit. But I don't see the question clarified there. So feel free to maybe drop me a note and we'll kind of get in there. Got a note in here about printing in AutoMail. Is it standard? If you've got a statement in AutoMail that says email, then email, P, then print, go to a default address, it's definitely, yes, you're right. You can definitely build all of that into and have AutoMail split that out. So it'll tell you which printer you want to send it to, which email address. If you wanted to do both, it would take care of that as well. Server-side reporting, is it a single queue? If we have multiple printers, does it queue at the printer level or is there just one queue? So that's a good point. Server-side at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, is a single queue. You can choose which priority level you want to set. So certain things can be higher priority, which means it will go ahead and print before the other ones, but the processing gets done in the queue and then the printer queues kick in. As soon as the processing is done, send down to the printer is where it will get picked up. So hopefully that clarifies. Yep. Yep.
I think it's one queue per company, I think, isn't it? And I think you
Yes.
can change the processing polling rate down as well a little bit.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
ultimately how it works.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so we've covered quite a bit of ground there in terms of what the difference level is. Performance. K3 reports, SYSPRO reporting services server side. We talked a little bit about performance, and then accessibility finally. So the one thing that I do like about K3 reports is the fact that you can access those reports directly from the web. And you have that web interface, whereas with SYSPRO, you are looking directly into SYSPRO reporting engine itself. And there are tools within SYSPRO that allow you to see that, no problem. All right.
We've had one little question come in, one last one.
Yep, I'm just reading that now. I find, Nick, the older I get, I can't multitask, I can't read and chew gum at the same time. So if you're auto-mailing an order confirmation, would you add a form field in the section that has the delivery address? And when it would send the mail to the address in that single order instead of a master email address? So yes, you could actually build it into a formula to say if it's a particular customer that you want to send it to that email address, you could do it that way. Or what you could do is define it so that you can say that email address is the one I always want to use. So in this case, my custom order acknowledgement or custom delivery address. If that doesn't exist, send it to the master email address instead, because I may not have it populated for all of my customers, and in that batch, want to pick it up individually. Hopefully that's answered the actual question. If not, feel free to clarify, definitely. It answers it, sounds like it, excellent. Good stuff.
I'll launch that poll.
If you don't mind. All right, so we've covered a little bit of ground here, and I just want to get a sense of what it is that you think is going to add the most value to your particular business. Now, only 5% have voted so far. There we go, that number's inching up, fantastic. Over half have voted, just a few more coming in now. All right, so it looks like that is the bulk of votes that are probably going to come in. Oh, nope. 79% have voted. All right. 2 more seconds and we'll close that poll. If you would do the honors for me, Nick, please.
I have closed it now.
Thank you very much. So what are we looking at? We have 56% that find SYSPRO reporting services adding the most value. And believe it or not, just under 20% are equally divided between K3 reports and AutoMail. That's really good to know, actually. That's fantastic. Bartender brings up the rear for me at 6%. So not too bad there, not too shabby at all. Excellent. All right, we've had very much of a whistle-stop tour today, and I know we had a bit of a discussion as well. There's more information that's available. We've gone into a little bit more detail around some of the tools with SYSPRO reporting services. In fact, Nick had done a couple of quick 20-minute videos on printing hacks that really go into some of the cool tips and tricks that you can do with SYSPRO reporting services itself. If you take a look at that hack series, and it sounds really terrible when I say hack, but it's more about productivity hacks, things that will save you time. And those two are available at that URL, the video recording will be shared afterwards as well. There is fantastic help that's available publicly for SYSPRO 8 specifically that you can follow through there. We've got some details around AutoMail and the document management solution itself. And for anyone that hasn't already sat through the SRS training, K3 hosts 2 days of SYSPRO reporting services training on a periodic basis. So contact your account manager to find out when the next one is. And it really does go into all of the details of how do you start from existing templates, modifying them to all of the tools that we really just skimmed the surface on today. And if that's something that you or someone else in your organization needs to just brush up on, it goes beyond Crystal, really it goes into the SYSPRO elements of it as well. So I think that's quite useful. The other thing that we've got in there are certain documents that we've created. There's one particular document that we found as customers are moving to server-side reporting. They have a couple of things that they need to be mindful of, a couple of things that they need to look out for, some things that might behave a little bit differently, or if they have any troubleshooting and things like that. Support have done a fantastic job and keep this document up to date. Some of them are gotchas, some of them are troubleshooting tips themselves. It's in the handout section for GoToWebinar, so if you want to download those. The web monitors are relatively new to us tool for AutoMail, so I've got a bit of a fact sheet that I've thrown in there as well in the handouts. And believe it or not, I can't remember the third handout that we uploaded in there. The third handout I think is going to help one of the questions in there, which is some of the nuances of things you can do, little tips and tricks with AutoMail when you're going into design. Some of the things that will really help drill in. And if you wanted to both print and email, back to Nick's point, how do you set that up? How do you actually do that? And it goes through step by step what you have to do for some of those weird and wonderful things in AutoMail. I thought it was a really cool document for just things that you might not have touched on in a while to go in and play with. So that is all that we have in here. All right, that's us.
We've had one final question, Darcy, if you want to.
Yes, of course.
So it's for Mark again around the queuing of things. So I think in answer to the question around over split sites and running factory doc and month-end reports, it's probably should mention that the SRS queue is separate from the document print queue, which means they would run together. So documents run in its own tangent, while SRS reports, which the finance team would be running separately to that.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So I'm just going to read the question out. The gist of the question is, if the accounts are running month end and they're running their reports and they want to print something like a works order, does factory have to wait until month end is done? Or can they actually do that separately because they have their own individual printers? So, is production going to pause just while we're trying to finish all our month end reporting? Because we've given that a higher priority in that queue when we're moving to server side. And that's actually a really valid point. So to Nick's answer, we talked initially when we talked about SRS about the fact that there are documents and there are reports, and each one of those has its own separate queue. So it does actually process differently. Now within documents, if you're printing a works order versus an invoice batch run, those would be within the same queue. So yes, you would have to look at prioritizing one over the other if you had a rush job that you needed to get out. So you have the ability, and there's a GUI, a front-end screen where you can change the priority and increase the priority of a job if you're waiting for something, to be able to have that process through a little bit quickly. But to answer the original question, which is month end going to get affected with production and vice versa, they're separated out. So they wouldn't affect each other. Nick, sanity check, did that answer make sense?
That was perfect. Perfectly coined.
I should say Mark, sanity check, does that answer your question? Okay, so it sounds like he's going to have a bit of a deeper conversation around that. Yep, no worries. We can definitely take that offline. And if there is enough demand, use the Q&A at the end of the GoToWebinar. If there are things that you wanted to know more about, things that you want us to do a separate session on or another webinar on as well, please feel free to put that in the Q&A, because we do pay attention to that. That's the reason why we've got this particular webinar. It was requested for doing a bit of a deeper dive in terms of some of the reporting tools that we have available. All right, well, that's getting close to our time, and I just wanted to say thanks very much to everyone that attended. Hopefully you found something of use today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all.